A significant concern when designing research plans is determining whether or not the variables you're considering really are related, or if there's something else going on behind the scenes that maybe you didn't consider. So this kind of situation where there are two or more explanatory variables whose effects for whatever reason we can't distinguish is what we mean by confounding. A lurking variable is one that wasn't considered in the study, but that has the potential to influence the results. Right, so the case here is one that we discussed in the last lecture, where a researcher sees that an increase or decrease in ice cream consumption always has a corresponding increase or decrease in drowning deaths, and mistakenly tries to conclude that ice cream consumption somehow leads to an increase in drowning deaths. Now, the problem here is that there's a third variable that's temperature or seasonality that wasn't considered in the analysis. Right? The changes in both the explanatory and response variables are actually being driven by these seasonal temperature changes. So this third variable that wasn't considered in the study, but that is causing the changes in both of the variables that were considered, is what we mean by a lurking variable. So this is another scenario that we discussed in the last lecture. The researchers have defined two explanatory variables, diet and exercise, and a response variable, the weight change. In this case, we can reasonably expect that the explanatory variables are driving the change in the response variable. The problem is we can't see what impact the individual variables have. For example, it might be that changes in diet don't matter. Even if the participants had stuck with their original diet, the exercise program alone would have been enough to cause the measured weight changes. Or maybe the opposite is true. It's diet that really matters, independent of exercise level. And of course, it's also possible that both variables are required to get the observed improvements in the participant's weight. The point is that there's no way to distinguish what the individual of each variable is, which is what we mean when we talk about a confounding variable. So if you compare the two definitions, they are very similar. In each case, it's impossible to state conclusively what impact the observed explanatory variables have on the response variable, possibly because of other variables that we didn't consider, or possibly because the variables we did consider are just so entwined that we can't distinguish between them. The key difference that you should focus on when trying to distinguish between the two types is whether or not the variable was considered in the study. Lurking variables aren't considered, where confounding variables are. So in the next sequence of lectures, we're going to start thinking about the different programs that can be used to structure our data collection. We're going to be circling back to these types of variables as we consider some of the potential problems with the various methods and what we can do to prevent or minimize them.